Mr. Nobody here again. Now I want to ask a good question that I think people should be asking themselves. Who fact checks the fact checkers? There's a whole industry that has developed sometime over the past maybe 25, 30 years. And they call it fact checking. You set up a firm somewhere, it takes on a name, so-and-so fact checker, or some, who knows, whatever name. Apparently there's some number of employees that has, though for reasons I will get to, it becomes quite clear that none of the individuals actually working for any of these firms is ever willing to stand up and say, I work for this firm. I, Mr. So-and-so by name, work for this firm. There's a reason they don't. There's a very simple reason. Because what they do is not fact-checking. It is a sham from one end to the other. What happens is this. You get various ignorant or cretinous or just people with an agenda to sell. They have some bit of information. They pass it to this black box known as this, fact-checking firm. They say, here's a claim. True or false? The firm gets back to you, and they'll say true or they'll say false. How do they know that? What did they do? Probably people imagine that, they look stuff up. They do the due diligence. They check it out. They go on site and stand to see what's going on. And they observe whatever it is there is to observe. And they look at what there is. And they question people who supposedly would know something, who should, by one sense or another, know something about it firsthand. And all these wonderful things. This is what we pay them to do. But is that what they do? I could categorically answer absolutely not. I mean, all those who could have said something, they never get contacted. All the standard references oftentimes contradict the stuff they say. Fact of the matter is, real fact here is, the only thing they seem to be doing, as far as we can tell, is they've got some kind of leftist, communist political agenda. And if it suits their narrative to say something's true, then they'll come back with, this is true. And if it doesn't suit their narrative to admit that a thing is true, they'll say, oh, this is false. And that's it. And the press and the company and the news agencies, everybody just runs with it. And they just take it like that. But if somebody were to find some way to buttonhole any of these firms and say, okay, you said that such and such claim is false. Can you show that? What research did you do to arrive at that conclusion? Share that with us, the public. They will not. They cannot. Because if somebody actually does the due diligence, if somebody actually does all that hard work, all that legwork, going here and there on site, interviewing individuals who would know firsthand about a particular claim, you see, that takes a lot of time and effort. But let's say somebody goes to that time and effort. Probably about 55% of the time, they'll find that the fact-checking firm got it wrong. They said this was true, it's false. They said that was false, it's true. About 55% of the time, either way. So if anything, there's a slight statistical probability that what they'll call false is true, or that what they'll call true is false, because they're not weighing anything against objective facts, verifiable facts. They just put it against, does this fit the communist, leftist, agenda that we wish to foist on a world that would never give us a moment's notice if they really knew what we were doing. And if it doesn't, then they'll say, oh, it's false. Or they'll say whatever suits their narrative. So what's needed is a kind of accountability. That doesn't exist right now. Why don't people admit to belonging to such firms? People instinctively know there's something wrong, something up with these things. Too many things they said are not true. People suddenly find out later on, wait a minute, it was true. Or things that they said were true, in fact, really wasn't true. People find this stuff out eventually, and somehow the false results, so very commonly coming out of these agencies, don't get questioned. They don't have any accountability. There's no Better Business Bureau out there saying, okay, so and so has refused the following 1,037 claims over the past 6 months, and these are what claims they said are true. These are what claims they said are false. And now here are the ones and here are all the ones where they were wrong, and here are the ones where they were right. No, there's no such accountability. And really, when you think about it, how do we know something like that might not be just another one, just like them? So, who can do this? And I have to say, it's an unhappy answer, but it's the only way we ever really know. And that is, we got to investigate the matters ourselves personally. We look for the people who have who are on site at whatever is being talked about. We look for what's going on. We try to get that real raw information, and we process it then. But first we get it. And we know what we did. We know what we researched. We know how we verified what we tested to know if it's true or false, or maybe a mixture, what have you. We know we've done the homework. And that's really the only accountability these things have, because nobody else is going to give them any accountability. Nobody's going to hold their feet to the fire and say, prove, And let's give a good, so let's take an example. Okay, I'm going to use a rather silly one because it's kind of apolitical, even because this is a lot more than just, politics or this. This is about trying to ascertain what's going on in the world around us. Did we get to the moon? Some will say, well, at the time, it was pretty much taken for granted that, yeah, we made it to the moon. When you consider all the people that were involved on so many different things, the people who pointed their antenna dishes at where the calculations said the rocket ship would have to be on its way to the moon, and would get a signal if it pointed the right direction and not if they didn't. The people who could shine a strong laser at the moon and see little dots reflected several seconds later when the light reflects on those little reflector things left by people who were on the moon. These things were all taken for granted. Everyone said, oh yeah, we went to the moon. Yeah, the idea is what if, in fact. They made a movie called Capricorn 1. And in the movie, it's a Mars voyage, but it's the same basic idea. It was all faked. At the last minute, somebody grabs the astronauts and sends them off to some weird little secret studio somewhere where they pretend to be on this, different planet, and so on and so forth. And then they escape, and they've got this huge adventure. That's the movie in a nutshell. So, but how do we know that didn't happen? Well, if we go ask these fact-checking companies, they'll just say yeah, or they'll say no, whatever they say. And so, maybe in a case like this, it'll probably suit their agenda. Since there's no real political stake on it, they'll probably say, yeah, it happened. And coming from them, that's probably that would be the best evidence that maybe it didn't. But actually, all it really means in that case is that they are willing to go along with what most people would just believe or take or assume as for granted. And it doesn't cost them anything. And they're certainly not going to do any of these things that people should do. They're not going to talk to any of the literally hundreds of thousands of people, a good number of whom are even still alive now, and all the more so were in the earlier years. Did we really go to the moon? Imagine asking Gene Kranz that, for example. No, we all just pretended. Everybody just pretended. We all knew it was a big scam. Even though not a single one had said, yeah, I was involved. We were faking this. We did it this way and that way and this way and that way. Interestingly, nobody, not a single individual, did with anything, whether they made rocket parts, whether they communicated to the rockets, whether they looked at the moon rocks brought back, and so on and so forth. You see, you can do the fact checking yourself, and that really is the only reliable way to do stuff. And if you haven't done it, then it's probably best not to hang out your shingles having any opinion about the question one way or the other. But if you've done the due diligence, you've checked, you've verified physically, manually, in a manner you could explain to others. I know this because I spoke to this guy here who was one of the astronauts. I spoke to, Gene Kranz and I were good friends. I know the man. He doesn't make stuff up. He really was concerned at bringing those Apollo 13 astronauts back home, and so on and so forth. And you know, and you look at all of that kind of stuff and realize this was something real. But a fact checking could say the opposite if it served their purpose. And there might be places where we don't want to say America was ever great. We didn't really go to the moon. If that's really the message, it might serve their purpose to say, no, we didn't go to the moon. Why? Because there's any evidence that we didn't? Not really. Merely because it suits their purposes. So, who's going to fact check the fact checkers? Only we ourselves. We can pretty much safely disregard everything these firms ever say because it's like the devil mixes lies with the truth. You never know. It's all noise and no signal. It's all without substance. It's all somebody flips a coin. It might as well be somebody flips a coin, Heads it's true, tails it's not. And that's the answer, that they give. Because they can't point to anything they actually did to check the supposed or actual facts in question. And that's what I have to say for that. Thanks for listening.